Good evening and welcome to the community room here at the Needham Free Public Library. Tonight we are finishing off our writers series. So tonight we have Jordan Rich, has been a staple on the Boston media scene for over 50 years. Along the way, he has shared stories on such stations as WBZ, WSSH, and WRKO in Boston, and has narrated the ads and emceed events for the Boston Symphony Orchestra and the dearly departed KB Toys. It is dearly departed. As a co-founder of Chart Productions in Braintree, Jordan is also a professional voiceover artist and trainer who previously taught at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting when it had a campus in Needham. Today, he is one of the regular remaining voices heard on WBZ and is the host of the Connoisseur's Corner, the WBZ Book Club, the New England Weekend, and the Upside with Jordan Rich, among other popular segments. As he is always dedicated to helping others, Jordan is donating 100% of the proceeds from his book, sales of the book, to Boston Children's Hospital. As our interviewer this evening, we have Matt Robinson, who has been a professional writer, editor, and educator for over 30 years, in which time he has published thousands of pieces all over the world and helped hundreds of students prepare for their own careers. He's also the author of Lions, Tigers, and Bulldogs, an unofficial guide to the legend and lore of the Ivy League, a book that demonstrates that these schools were not always so crazy. Currently, Matt is teaching writing and entrepreneurship at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office, interviewing area authors on his show, The Writer's Block, on the Needham channel, and also here, and contributing food-related pieces to WBZ Radio, and teaching boxing. Hopefully we don't get a demonstration of that tonight. So without further ado, let us begin.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Yeah,
a real radio guy, you can tell.
Yeah, right. Yeah, when I get in there, the mic is there. You know, put on the headphones. Yeah, you know, you edit it anyway. It's probably not even my voice anymore. Anyway, so welcome everybody. I just wanted to let you know that Galen has been gracious enough to extend an invitation for more authors starting up again in September. It'll be the fourth Tuesday of the month, so watch for that. We'll be the foundation's putting out the newsletter that you see on the table and around the building, so there'll be notice of that. And as I'm sure some of you know, I will be emailing you relentlessly as soon as we have them scheduled. But thank you for coming tonight to, I guess, the wind up, the culmination, the capstone of our first season. It's been really great. I'd like to thank the Needham channel, of course, my friends and colleagues at the foundation, Galen and the staff here, and all of you, some of whom have been here for every event we've done. So thank you very much for that. We should have like little punch cards, so buy 6, get 1 free. Anyway, so just a little context about how this came together. Many years, I think it was your 35th year, I interviewed you, and you invited me to come on your overnight show. Yes. And we were talking about journalism and how hard it was to be a freelancer, as I have been for many moons. And you asked me what I like to write about. And I said, well, I started as a music writer, but now that I'm getting older, I can't be out till 1 in the morning every day. So I go have dinner at the club and then review the opening act. And he said, oh, so you write about food? I said, yes. He said, do you have a website? And I said, Jordan, you know, I'm so busy freelancing, I've never taken the time to put together a website. He said, well, if you had it, what would it be called? And I said, oh, I don't know, maybe Matt's Meals or something. And he leans into the mic, which was this way, and he said, ladies and gentlemen, that's mattsmeals.com. And I am across the table giving him the only radio signal I know. But I got home at 1 o'clock in the morning, and at 1:20, that was created. And ever since we've been
I've been accused of creating other births, but that was the one that I'm most proud of. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, other than outside of your family, of course.
Oh no, just my family. That's
right. So and basically, you know, Jordan and I get together now at Chart Productions in Braintree, which is his studio, and we knock off 20 or 30 of these 1-minute segments about independent food makers and restaurants. I don't work with any chains. I grew up in an independent retail family. that was crushed by Mr. Walton from Arkansas. So, there's no McDonald's, none of that stuff on our show, at least on my segments. And as you can see, we've made a lot of friends. All these people volunteered to send their delicious food and drink, which I hope you'll all enjoy after we're done talking. But as you can ask my family, there are a few days I look forward to more than when I'm going to go on with Jordan. We have the best time. If anyone ever got a hold of our B-roll, we'd both be in prison. But it's really a wonderful way to support the community. So when the writer's block came together, you were like my second or third interview. We did it by Zoom. But, the book is absolutely fabulous, whether you know Boston radio or not. We'll get more into the details. But, and of course, the fact that all the proceeds go to Children's Hospital, it's really just so you, Jordan. And I'm very grateful that you could make it out tonight.
I'm honored to be here, and I'm really amazed at the turnout. This is great. Thank you so much. And I've run into some old friends, and can't wait to chat with you guys during and after. So.
All right, so let's get it going. So, what first got you interested in broadcasting?
The fact that I have no talent in any area of life, without any exception. What got me into the broadcasting game is what probably brought most of you, with a few exceptions in the front perhaps, into this room tonight, the lure and love and magic of radio. When I was in my early days in the 1960s, was born in '58, I would listen to the radio in bed with a little earpiece with green wax on it. And I would listen to radio stations at night, and I was amazed that I could hear a station in Cleveland or Chicago or New York, and all these voices coming at me from all these other places. During the day, no, you couldn't do that. So that was the first introduction to it. And then I got into in high school, and we had a little radio club. And the radio club was pretty interesting. We'd have a little tape recorder, and the woman would bring in guests that were very exciting. Assistant superintendent of schools for the Randolph Public Schools. We have a former Randolph teacher here. You know how exciting those people are, the assistants. But anyway, that was the start of the radio thing. And then I got into theater, and I loved it, and realized and I'll make this quick, when I was done with high school, I stood in the mirror with my cap and gown, and I realized I was 92 pounds soaking wet, and I didn't have the body or the face for a real actor, maybe a character actor. So I said, radio, I've always loved it. So I went to Curry College, and then the rest is history. It took off from there. And it's been 50 plus years, because I started very young.
Who are some of your broadcasting heroes and inspirations?
I love this question, because I'm going to mention a bunch of names that are local to this area, but I'll also go a little far afield and mention other greats and other names. I mean, I was listening to old Jack Benny radio shows, right? Old time radio, The Shadow, all these things, well after they had come and gone. But I just found it fascinating. Radio dramas, E.G. Marshall, the CBS Radio Mystery Theater, all these things. But in terms of radio heroes, I grew up in an era when the likes of Jess Kane and Dave Maynard and Norm Nathan, my all-time favorite friend and hero. So many, and as we go along, people can maybe mention other, Alan Derry and all these wonderful disc jockeys and announcers and newsmen and women. And I was just impressed and fascinated. And I want to thank a guy who never made it. His name was Jimmy Rosenberg. I think his name on the air was Jimmy Rose. He was in the deli department at First National Supermarket in Randolph at the time. And he worked at a station in Taunton, WPEP, PEP Radio. And he invited me down to, I was 12, and he invited me down to the studio on a Sunday. And that did it. I was hooked. And I loved it. And so that's, as far as heroes go, Paul Harvey is a national hero of mine. Steve Allen. And I know I'm mentioning men, and that's because the era was very male-centric. But over the years, there have been some amazing and wonderfully talented women as well. And thankfully, it's a much more diverse group of people that do it now. But yeah, these are some of the people I emulated.
How did you get from broadcasting, where did you meet Ken and start the production company?
I met my business partner in class at Curry College in 1976, And we've been together ever since, longer than most married couples. And he's an amazing guy. He's currently a professor at Curry as well as my business partner. But we were of the opinion that even then, in 1976, 77, 78, it wasn't exactly a safe and secure industry. It's even less so today. But we decided, let's do something on our own, just in case we can't get a job as a disc jockey somewhere. So we started our own little disc jockey company and then started doing what is termed in the business production. Production means voice work, whether it's commercials or characters or so. So we did radio plays and we did all this kind of fun stuff. And our first commercial, which we got while we were still in college, was for Davy Chevrolet. Anybody remember that on the North Shore? And we did the worst Toyota commercial in the history of commercials. It was so bad, but they bought it and they used it and it was on the air. And ever since then, he's been my best buddy and my partner, and we've been through a lot together, a lot of highs and, personal highs and some personal lows and things. As Bogey said in The Maltese Falcon, you do what you do for your partner. That's what partners do. So.
I guess that's the voice training sneaking out there.
Yeah, I can't help myself anyway.
Shouldn't have to. So you started with ads, now you do podcasts and audiobooks. How do you keep on the cutting edge of audio technology?
Audio technology, we have someone here. I'm going to call people out. I hate to do this. Miss Alpert, Carol Alpert is here from Needham. She's in the voiceover business. I actually trained her 28 years ago or something like that. And she's a very successful voice actor and on-camera actor. And how do I keep up to things? If you don't, you're left behind. And and you guys can all relate to this because we were all around then and here now. I think it was 1992, we went from typing our invoices to getting a computer, the first computer. Now, we were still analog in terms of tape and razor blades and records and all that stuff. And then in 1998, we switched to a digital format that I had no idea what I was doing. I had none. Now I do it like in my sleep and have been following the trends. And the trends, as you all know, and you know as very, very well, is like television became TV on demand. You pay for it, right? Cable and all that. Well, radio on demand is the podcast platform. And thankfully, you don't have to pay for it for the most part. It's usually free. And people are doing programs for all kinds of things. For instance, there's probably a program on cheese popcorn that your lovely daughter is eating. A podcast on cheese popcorn.
There's actually 3. I did the research.
You did, okay. So I got into that about 8 years ago when it really started to pick up, and also realized people don't read as much as they listen, so now I'm doing audiobooks. I've been doing that for about 10 years. And still doing commercials and narrations and things like that, but it's you have to stay up with the trends, social media and all that kind of stuff. As much as I hate to admit it, I know how to use all the tools. But yeah, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing what I'm doing, but it's so easy now to do what I'm doing. And anyone here have their own podcast yet? Oh, what's the matter with the town of Needham? It's not that hard, and you don't have to have an FCC license to do it. So it's a very accessible thing, and I love that. And I love helping people get their own shows started.
All right, now it's time for a cascade of name dropping. I want to hear some of your favorite people that you've interviewed, celebrity or otherwise.
Well, in the back of the book, I list a whole bunch of celebrities, and that from actors, authors, historians, sports figures, etc. And to be honest, most of them, I remember them for the most part, but most of them were okay. I've often been disappointed by celebrities because I'm thinking they're going to be really interesting and they're or and I'll tell you the secret to getting a good interview in a second, but I would say offhand some of my favorites are including smart people. George Carlin, he was a hero. Dick Cavett, Joan Rivers, all these comedians and so forth were really fun to talk to because they don't ever have a loss of words. They've got something to fill. And then really, for me, it's been authors, and you interviewing me, but I've interviewed thousands, literally thousands in my many years. And for the most part, and there's one sitting right over here, Tom Keating, right over there, local author, who I interviewed. For the most part, if you've written a book, you've got something to say and something to offer, and you've done some research. So it's a story that you're going to be telling beyond the pages to me and my audience. So I just have a great time. But as far as celebrities, I mean, you know, the Charlton Hestons and the big stars, Anthony Quinn and all these big names. You want a funny story? Okay. Mickey Rooney, you guys will know. Mickey Rooney, who was...
Actually, they do know from Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh, my goodness. Good for you. Wow.
The landlord.
Yeah, the landlord. Bad makeup job.
Yeah.
Oof. But Mickey Rooney was in a show called Sugar Babies with Ann Miller, if anybody remembers that. Remember? And I was going over to interview Mickey Rooney, and I got there, and if you know the Wang Center, it's got that beautiful staircase, the marble and all that. Mickey Rooney makes his entrance by sliding down the banister. He's 4'9", like this. There's the banister, and there's Mickey. That's how he made his entrance, and he was completely insane, completely nuts, and I loved it. It was just great. William Shatner, I'm a big Star Trek fan. I'll just two more. William Shatner, I've interviewed him several times because he's always pushing something and promoting something. And he's the kind of guy that if you don't want to talk Star Trek, he's happy because it's all he does is talk Star Trek. So I would talk with him about Star Trek a little bit, but then I would talk to him about horses because he loves horses. So you find things that people do. The other one I always go to is, because I'm a big James Bond fan, all the things that I like to do, I follow up on. Roger Moore, most elegant guy. When he was working for UNICEF, he came into Boston to the Ritz Hotel. I showed up, Kenny was with me, and I sat down with Roger Moore, 007, and of course I had to ask him, can you say the line just once? Bond, James Bond. And then we ended up talking about junk food, believe it or not, because I asked him, I said, do you ever sit around not in a tuxedo and eat Cheetos or something? And he actually looked at me and said, Cheetos? What an amazingly interesting idea. That was it. Memorable moment. But anyway, I've had a lot of fun, and interviewing people is my joy because I'm curious, as you are.
And what are some stories about your listeners who've called in and shared, people that we might know, not know their names?
Well, you might know one of my listeners and occasional co-hosts. He's here tonight. His name is, Richard, but it's Dixie on the radio. He's often heard on the Morgan White Show now. He did my baseball show for years. Listeners in talk radio, as you may know, they're known as regulars, the ones who call a lot. And I'm talking regularly, like once a week. If they're allowed to, they'll be once a night. And I think in the course of my career, I probably could rattle off 50 characters that you thought I made up. They're real people. I mean, these are real people, but as a former disc jockey, I would say it this way: they are the music on the show. In other words, those are the records that I'm playing. I'm playing the callers as my music. And some of them were very bright, some of them were not very bright, some of them were just funny, some of them were off the freaking wall, and many of them, because of my hours, many people were just lonely and wanted to connect. But the most famous for BZ fans was Generosa from Peabody. She was a very old lady. She lived to be 100, and she had a distinctive voice, Friday, Friday. And then there's Glenn from Brighton, who's still calling in, right, Dix? I mean, there's a bunch of them. There's one guy, I'll mention this very quickly, and you get a kick out of this. Contests on the radio used to be the big thing in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And there was one guy who figured out how to beat every contest. His name was Richard. He was an accountant, and he was blind. And he'd say, I'll take the fifth caller at 931-1995. Richard had a system that he figured out. It's kind of like the guys who count cards in Vegas. And he figured out, and he would win everywhere, at every station. So he used to call me to try to win a prize. I say, Richard, I just heard you win something on the FM station 2 days ago. Don't you ever quit? And he was so famous or infamous that Boston Magazine did an article on him. I think it ruined his career because everybody knew. We had a sign, don't take Richard as the fifth caller. Because he used to win all the time. It wasn't fair. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, when I was working at WHYY in Philadelphia, I had a scam going for about 2 days with a friend of mine. I would call him and tell him when to call, and then I would be his +1 for whatever tickets he won. But our producer was pretty smart and figured it out darn quick.
Statute of limitations, you don't have to worry from the FCC on that.
All right. So in addition to all your legendary on-air work, you also do a lot of emceeing and work with a lot of organizations and foundations. How did that get started, and what have been some of your favorite projects?
You know what? What I've found is that in radio particularly, and TV too, a lot of people, very talented people who are on the air, are very shy and don't like to be out in front of a group. They're very comfortable behind the mic and behind the screen and so forth. I worked with a guy in WSSH in Woburn, Mass. At night, in an office building, at night, he was 8 to midnight, would put brown paper on the wall, on the window leading to the lobby. And there was nobody there, maybe a janitor or something. And he was that, insecure. So I would just get asked, hey, can you MC this charity event? And I said, sure, what do you need me to do? And I just kind of gravitated to it. I'm a big ham. I love this kind of stuff. And it turns out, I'll name some names. There's about 5 of us who do most of the stuff in town. One is Susan Warnick. You remember her from Channel 5? Kiss 108 in the morning. Bill Costa. Billy Costa. My friend Candy O'Terry. Yes. And Joyce Gilhaywick. Yeah. I saw Joyce yesterday, in fact. So it's weird because I'll show up at some place, and on the next dais or in the next room in a hotel, there's Joyce or Candy. But anyway, I love people, and to me it's theater. I mean, and it's also playing without a net. Remember Annette? She was a sweetheart.
Yeah.
It's playing without a net.
Hey-o.
Hey, what I mean by that is
night,
a lot of, and you're right, Matt. We do everything in recording studios, and I can fix anything in the edit. But I have an absolute love of live, in the moment. Anything can happen, and I think I don't have a lot of skill sets, but one of my better ones is knowing sort of how to handle a tough situation at a live event. I mean, we've had things where people have keeled over and fainted. We've had things, stanchions have fallen down. And one time, I'll end with this, one time I was supposed to MC an event for the American Lung Association, and it was a comedy night in Burlington, Mass. at the Burlington Marriott, right? And all these people showed up, they were sitting at tables and they were all set. And the guy who's running the event comes up and says, we have a problem. What's that? The comedians. Yes, what about it? Well, if you noticed, it's 8:05 and they're not here yet. Oh, really? He gets a call. There's 2 comedians. They went to Burlington, Vermont. The comedians. That's really funny. So John, the fellow running this thing, says, what the hell are we going to do? What are we going to do? I said, I got this. I had just come off a cruise about 6 months earlier, and I stole this bit, the nearly or almost or not quite newlywed game. I said, let me handle this. So I picked 3 couples from the crowd. They thought it was all part of the routine. And I did an hour and a half and killed. And to me, to this day, I think that's one of my highest achievements in the broadcasting world. And I don't even know if those guys ever made it back. How do you go all the way to Burlington, Vermont and make it back to Burlington, Mass? Anyway.
You can't get there from here. So how did Children's Hospital become kind of your baby? Because you also have the book that you've been putting out for years for the hospital.
If you guys remember, and you're all, so many of you are BZ people because we all grew up with BZ, right? I mean, we all waited for Gary to shout out, no school, Hingham. No school, Needham. BZ was the official radio station to raise money for children's for years. Dave Maynard was the big player in that. And when he retired in the mid-90s is when I started, and nobody told me to do it. I just thought, it might be kind of fun to do something to keep it alive in my audience. And what happened was a lady sent me a poem. I'll never forget this. In 1996, a poem that she wrote about her mother who had Alzheimer's. And I was really touched, and I read the poem on the air, and people said, I'd love a copy of that poem, right? Okay, I'd love a copy of that poem, I'd love a copy. I ran out 50 copies of this poem, I didn't mind doing it. And then I realized, maybe if I read something else or let people know that there are other things out there, they might actually want to support a charity and, buy. So anyway, long story short, I put together these little booklets that were fun with recipes and poems and stories and jokes and things like that. I called it the Book of the Year or whatever. And that was how it took off. And I did telethons and radiothons and so forth, and still support the hospital when I can.
So this is a semi-selfish question, because if you hadn't started these segments, we probably wouldn't be here. But when did Connoisseur's Corner and all those specialties come up?
Well, I'm very happy to say that I'm still at BZ almost 30 years, and I don't do live shows anymore. I don't do the late night. Well, we can talk about reasons why in a minute, but they've given me these features. I'm the features editor. I actually have a title. So Connoisseur's Corner is 20 plus years, 23 years, I think, which means I figured it out, 5,000 to 6,000 episodes, and Matt's on about 4,500 of them. Not quite, but almost. With various people, wine, cheese, we do it all. And then the other ones are the New England Weekend, which I inherited, and 3 others, books, movies, and then my favorite, which is The Upside, which is Good News Story. Couldn't we use a little good news, folks? Right? So this week it's about a guy up in Iceland, of all places, known as the Bike Whisperer, who was sick and tired of bikes being stolen. He retrieves them, and then he, well, you do this, he rehabilitates people who make bad decisions. Anyway, good news stories. So that's been my gig for the last, all told, probably 25 years.
What have been some of your favorite of those segments?
Oh my God, I've done about 500 of these. They do 1 or 2 a week. And most of them are about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Ordinary people. If you ever go to the Celtics games, they have a wonderful Heroes Among Us segment at a Celtics game where people walk out and, 2 guys who saved a dying child in a pond or something. There's that kind of thing. There's medical advances. There's ecological stories that are heartwarming, and animal stories. There's a story in the paper today, I'm going to do a piece on this, about a rodeo clown who roped, did you see that? Who roped, I think, 4 zebra and retrieved. The fact that it's a rodeo clown, and he got in the headline, I love that. To me, that's a beautiful thing. So he's no longer the class clown, he's the hero. Anyway, it's good stuff, just enough. It makes me feel good, so I hope it makes people feel good. There you go.
All right. And so segue to, if you want to feel good after you leave here, highly recommend the book. And, all I do is interview authors, so this is one I've actually read all the way through. But anyway, don't tell anybody else.
It's a very easy read.
No,
It's quick.
But so how did you decide that a memoir was the thing to do?
It was like everybody else in the pandemic. What am I going to do? I'm sitting here. What am I going to do? I have 2 grandchildren, 9 and 5 this year, and I thought, I've interviewed 8 gazillion authors, and I know how difficult it is to write a book. Do I really want to do this? Yeah, give it a shot. So I did, and I did it for my own sake and my family's sake, really. And then it turned out to be pretty successful because people can relate to the radio stuff because we all grew up with it in this area. And then there's personal stuff that I share, and I think they can relate to that too. So that was it. I'm not toying with another book at the moment like you. You're the author here. It's really tough, and I had help from a nice author friend of mine as well.
What are some of the tidbits that people might not know that you reveal in the book?
Well, it's interesting because I've revealed a lot of things on the air. the things that I write about in the book, I talked about in the air. One was the passing of my first wife in 2013, and what that experience was like, and stories that surrounded that. When she passed, I took 3 weeks off, and when I came back, I said to the audience, I said to the producer who sits on the other side of the glass, I do not want to take any phone calls this hour, and then I want to move on, but I feel I owe it to the audience to tell the story. And I literally had the notes on the back of a napkin, and I told my story, and then I see a line blinking. You were in the studio, you remember this. See a line blinking, and it blinking and blinking, it's on hold, and I said during the last break at 10 minutes of 1, I said, who's that? He said, you're going to want to take this call. Yeah, but who is, you're going to want to take this call. This is a kid, my producer. Took the call, okay, I said I wouldn't, but I did. And it was a nurse from MGH, now MGB, who had treated my wife as she came out of surgery for a lungectomy a year earlier, and just had the sweetest things to say about how brave my wife was and all this kind of stuff, and how she talked about her family, and I just lost it. I mean, it was amazing. And I thought we'd move on, and we did 4 hours of not about me, but about people's reaction to things like that, because we all do. The other thing is clinical depression, which I dealt with in the 90s and part of the aughts. Not fun, but a life-changing experience. And I think sharing that was good for me, but it was good for the audience because they realized, again, you know, that just because you're on the radio or you're a sports figure or anybody, you're a human being. Show your vulnerability. So those two things are the most dramatic. And then there's just the goofy stuff, the things I do to make myself laugh.
Such as?
I tickle myself. No,
Tickle yourself.
I can't, I know. But, I don't know if you're going to ask me this or not, but it's public knowledge. In January, you know Dan Ray does the 8 to Midnight show. And he's a dear, dear friend. In January, and I often did fill in for Dan. And I had my last fill-in on January 12th, and I requested that night specifically because I decided I couldn't fill in anymore because back in October I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Now, before you get all weepy and concerned, I'm doing fine. I'm in the early stages. I'm boxing like this, well, not like him, because he knows how to box, but I'm doing all kinds of things to keep healthy. But I decided, darn it, I'm going to go on the air and tell the story and have people on who can inform other people about this and chronic illness, et cetera, et cetera. And it was for me, it was a very important night because I had walked away from the thing I love the most. You know, I had to do one more show. I mean, I love doing this. This is great because it's real people. But so those kinds of things are. I think the greatest gift I have received is the ability to connect with people I don't know and share things and relate on a one-to-one basis, understanding my humanity and everyone else's.
What do you see for broadcasting and for what's going to be in my 100-year?
Well, the good news is, and this is technology, I can do everything that I do in the studio, I can do from my little den office in my home. That is phenomenal, right? I see some heads. We are living in an amazing age for that. So that's aces. I have no intention of retiring, no intention of stopping because what I do is creative and fun. But as far as the industry is concerned, I don't think I need to educate anybody on what's going on. We are living in an infotainment world. News is not news anymore, it's opinion. Everywhere. I mean, there's no such thing as an objective approach because human beings are fallible and all that. And I think there's so much, I'm not going to use the word mis or disinformation, but there's so much chatter that is not really relevant, and we get swept up in it, and the best advice I have is to turn things off. I'm actually, turn off the radio. Oh, boy, that's a great message.
Except on Saturdays and Sundays at 9:30, 10:30, and 11:30.
And Morgan White at 10 o'clock.
Right. Well, Morgan, of course.
But no, seriously, I'm saddened by the fact that journalism has gone so below standard with the people that are graduating. And I met two young ladies here at the school who are going to Emerson, and I said, they're in the back, they've done a lot of great work. They interviewed Matt earlier, and I said, you know, yeah, let's bring them on out here for a bow. These are our future broadcasters right here, and they've done a beautiful job. And what I noticed about both of you young ladies is, first of all, you're very professional in the way you asked your questions to Matt when you interviewed him on the camera, but you also had a curiosity and an interest. And frame of reference is the most important thing I've learned in my career. To be able to understand where people are coming from with a little bit of history, a little bit of culture, a little bit of knowledge, language, whatever it might be, that's going to make you a better broadcaster. Don't ever stop being curious. So thank you, and good luck. My pleasure.
Well, you mentioned Morgan, and as much as I owe you for my career and for all the fun we've had, I owe Morgan a slightly larger debt. In addition to being a brilliant physician, my wife is an art history major, and our first date was at the Coolidge Corner Clubhouse in Brookline, where Morgan White used to do his trivia nights. And the question was I grew up in Lowell, so the Whistler family, and the question was something about James McNeill Whistler, and I got it, and apparently she went home and called her mother and said, he knows art history too. And here we are.
Did you hear that, Dix? That's a pretty good story.
Yeah. So Morgan's always been a dear friend as well. But you know, this relationship, I can't say enough about this guy and how much he's given to so many people. And thank you, everybody, for coming. Do you have any last comments? And then we'll open up for questions.
I would love questions. No, my only comment is how exhilarating it is to be out in the evening, just talking about something I love and meeting so many nice people. I've always loved Needham anyway. Needham is a great town, and I know Matt is a big proponent of Needham as I am. So thank you so much. And any questions at all, I'll answer for anyone.
Less of a question, more of how effective and wonderful the medium of radio is. Back in 1969, I was in the U.S. Army down at Fort Jackson, and there was a bunch of us Boston area guys. We were kind of homesick, and one of the guys got into the comm locker and took out one of the field radios that we use. You've seen soldiers with the big box with the antenna. It's called the PRC-25 radio, and that's what they use to communicate. Well, it was an FM receiver, and back in 1969, WBZ was a clear channel after 6 p.m., correct?
Yeah, it still is, yeah.
And it still is, but back then, he figured out a way to tune into WBZ, and we listened to Jerry Williams and felt like we were right home. Sometimes we listened to the Celtics. It was a nice kind of cure for our homesickness. That's the power of radio.
Yeah.
When you became interested as a young child in radio when you first heard it, did you ever think about becoming a ham radio operator?
Oh, what a great question. No, but I've got to tell you that over the years, particularly doing the late night show for so many years, I got friendly with, informally, with a bunch of ham radio people who would call in and check in. And a tip of the hat, because during tough, crazy crises, ham radio people are amazing. And I don't know, you can probably answer this, if young people are into ham radio the way, our generation was.
Not unfortunate. There are still many ham radio clubs around. In Newton, there's one. I don't know if Needham has one. Wellesley has one. I don't think it's as popular as it had been in our generation, but my husband started when he was 13, and he's about 10 years older than you was. And he was, when I met him, he was into ham radio. And when we had the blizzard of 78, all the signals were down. And in fact, they asked ham radio operators, and he was one of them that went on the military trucks, because that's when we realized that military didn't have the kind of equipment that was needed. And the ham radio operators were going to the places to pick up the nurses and bring them to the hospitals and stuff like that.
They were also very helpful during 9/11, coordinating. I mean, I can't say enough about these people. They're really, really great. And when I was a kid, I remember the house in the neighborhood that had that big antenna. I didn't know what that was. I thought, whoa, they're probably getting good TV reception in that place. But it was the ham radio operator. Yeah, good for you. Well, I have the greatest respect for that. I'm going to stand up so I can see people.
Thank you, sir.
I too have been listening to radio for 70-plus years, and to this day I cannot go to sleep without something in my ear. And it's good that we have Bluetooth now so I don't strangle myself. But I've been saddened the last couple of months because of layoffs. Today they announced that Kim Tunnicliffe
Yes.
was, laid off. Several WBUR people were laid off.
Yes.
And Odyssey Radio
Yep.
laid off people. What do you think is going on?
Bean counting corporate types are so leveraged and so in the hole. iHeart, which is the owner of BZ and a gazillion stations, you know, they own everything, but they really don't own anything because they owe so much money to the various, you know, loan lenders. So they're over leveraged and they don't consider, well, two things. BUR is a different situation because that's a public facility that, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, is greatly overstaffed. I mean, an amazing number of people that they have, and they've rolled that train for a lot of years. I feel bad for the people who are losing their jobs, but it's a little different than the commercial side because they still have tax dollars and all that. They just don't have the donations that they want. But it's the corporate mentality. And before the FCC changed the rules about ownership and you couldn't own so many stations in one cluster, it was a lot different. You had local radio, you had more opportunity for variety and so forth. It's very, unfortunately, it's very stale and very almost automated in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's Kim I've known forever, 26, 27 years, something like that, long time. That hurts when you hear about somebody like that, sweetheart. And she's also, you know, what is she gonna do now in the industry? I don't know. I hope she can find something.
Can I ask another question?
No, yeah, of course you can.
What made Larry Glick so popular?
2, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Glick here. What made him so popular? He was crazy. He was fun. He was a relief. For those of you who don't know, Larry was in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. Late night, midnight to 5, midnight to 6. And he was totally irreverent. And I think, yeah, hi, let me check. Not bad, thank you. The Larry Glick salute. He did a lot of things that you couldn't get away with today, you know, that were a little off tempo, blowing people up on the air with the sound effects. But he was an entertainer. And I think ultimately that's what people tune in for. They tune in to be entertained. You know, and I do my best, we all do our best, and whether it's that or somebody who's warm and inviting or sexy on late night, whatever the heck it is, they want to be entertained. And I'll tell you one thing about Larry. He was a hypnotist, did you know that? Stage hypnotist. And I worked with him a couple of times, you know, as his MC, and he was hysterical because he'd forget that he hypnotized people. So he would hypnotize like 8 people, and so tell me, you're gonna be a chicken, right? All this kind of stuff. And then he'd turn around and walk away, and 2 people were still out. And I said, Larry, what are you gonna do with these 2 guys? Oh, sure. It was really funny, but he was great. Thank you. Yes.
Speaking about local press.
Local press.
I'm here from the Hometown Weekly in Needham, and we're a local paper that still exists, but of course,
Good for you.
in the local newspaper arena, a lot of papers were bought out by the corporate giant Gannett newspapers, and then the same thing happened
Right.
as with iHeartRadio. Editors were fired, reporters were fired, photographers were fired, and now it's just pretty much regionalized, whatever's left of it. So it struck a chord with me when you were mentioning that. But luckily, we're still locally owned.
Well, the sad thing is, I mentioned that WPEP radio station. It might still be there, but I think it's a Spanish or religious station format or something. The AM stations that were popular when we grew up and when we were younger are pretty much done. There's nothing that they can do to make any money except sell block programming. So that's something that we miss. We miss local. We miss getting up in the morning and hearing about school cancellations or, the local town library news. But it's a different world because you get all that stuff on your phone, and that's what they'll tell you. But keep writing. Teach him a thing or two about how to write.
I used to enjoy the All Rise podcast, which you hosted or co-hosted, but it seems to have disappeared, or at least there's no new episode.
Yeah, you're talking about a podcast I helped create with the person, Diane Godfrey, who is a court reporter, and it was called All Rise, and it was about court cases and things like that. But what happens with podcasts is you get busy and other things take the place, because this is not her full-time job. This is not her full-time occupation. And I've created dozens and dozens of podcasts. Some of them are still going, and many of them, they do 10 episodes and then they just kind of move on to something else. The secret, if you want to do a podcast, is to try to keep it consistent. So I've got 430 episodes of my own podcast, and I don't ever want to slow down because it's so much fun. But people expect it, they subscribe to it. So, but I'll tell Diane you were asking for it. Boy, are you asking for it.
Hopefully he won't be in the story anytime.
Yes, you won't be in a court case at any point.
Thanks so much. I was actually a caller not a regular, but a caller when I was 5 to 10 years old as Todd from Brookline. And then on Wish, I would call in the mornings to win a Baby Watson cheesecake.
Oh, I remember that campaign. I gave away hundreds of those cheesecakes.
I probably took half of them. No, different birthdays every day. And I remember, listening to the radio with my dad and how special that was for us. How do we keep radio as a forefront for the next generation?
Well, it's so interesting you say that. What's your name, Todd? Todd. So interesting you say that, because I ask people younger than 40, believe it or not, so do you have a radio in the house? Nah, I don't have a radio. What's a radio? You do. It's on the phone, or it's on the computer and the laptop. So I think it's just the way it's being delivered. And I consider podcasts, as I said, radio on demand. And you can find things that are, I listen to all kinds of things, political, non-political, sports, because it's the human voice. It's the connection that we make with the human voice. And the best part about the human voice on radio is, this is going to be very profound, imagination, right? Yeah. It's the world of imagination. Now, when I used to listen to baseball games, and Dixie and I are big baseball fans, and many of you are, and I would listen to a baseball game in Cleveland, I could see the Red Sox on the Cleveland base pads, and I could hear the action and all that kind of stuff. And the same with radio drama, or the same with anything. And that's the magic. And it doesn't necessarily have to come off the AM or FM band per se directly. It can come off the computer.
That's cool. No, my grandfather was Tommy Shulman, who was on Eazy-E in the 60s. And my grandmother brought me up, as a radio family.
Let me guess, did he work in the Park Plaza Hotel in the corner?
And he had a column in the Boston Record, Tips on Career Guidance. It was just radio was our life. And I became a caller on Dave Maynard's show. Yes. I think I was the youngest person ever to get bleeped on the radio for swearing.
Wow.
But it's amazing to meet you, and it is fun. I'm trying to get my son to realize that listening to a baseball game or basketball game can be more fun than watching. And it's Johnny Most, made our life. He was the Celtics to me. So
you
Someone just asked the question, what about the future of radio? Well, I think it wasn't long ago that I heard there's talk of, I don't know which car manufacturer is going to cease putting a radio in the car. Now, I'm going to go back to the 1950s when the guy that I was dating drove his father's car, and his father refused to pay to buy a radio. And the big day came when Dad decided he was going to get the radio so we could listen to the radio. And I just think that that is retro in the wrong way. I think that what I heard was that they're saying that for safety regulations, people should have a radio in the car, that otherwise you're saying that people are absolutely on their own going to have an alternative radio source.
If I could just jump in, the question is regarding AM radio, and you're absolutely right. There's been a move by some of the car companies to do away with AM radio. I must say, no matter what you think of him politically, Ed Markey is championing the cause. Ed Markey and the senator from Texas, two completely opposite polar points of view on everything, agree on this. We have to support and keep AM radio, because when there's a storm or a flood in New England, our ratings go through the roof. People are listening to BZ, right? So the good news is they're fighting it in Congress, and I think they might even have passed or will be passing a bill. That might be me, I'm not sure. But I couldn't agree with you more. Could not agree with you more. I mean, the first thing you do is you turn the radio on. What happened, right? Right. Especially in the car.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
I agree.
Let's not forget Fred Cusick for the Bruins.
Yes.
I know you're one of the nicest guys ever to walk the face of the earth, so you might not want to use names here, but could you tell us about your one or two worst interviews and why they were so bad?
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure. I write about them in the book. That was not a setup either. The worst one occurred a week after the Super Bowl in 2003, when there was the malfunction, Janet Jackson, and the FCC decided to levy fines that were $10,000 to $300,000. I mean, for obscenity or whatever. I had a guest on that I thought was reasonable and a good subject, talking about teenagers and how to talk to them about sexuality and maturing and all that kind of stuff. Very heady, academic, and this was very tough, because this gentleman, a professor from Dartmouth, of all places, decided to use vulgar language, thinking he was just talking to his class, I guess. And I'm talking things that I never heard of, terms I never heard of. And you know me, I've heard of a lot of things.
I've heard them from you.
The producer, God rest her soul, had a lot of problems with drugs and alcohol, and was not paying attention, and the 10-second delay didn't hit it, and this went over the air. And I'm thinking, oh God, my career is over. This is 2003. And he did it twice, because I couldn't cut him off, and I kept hitting the button, cut him off, cut him off. So a guy went to a commercial, dropped him, called him the next day and said, Professor Jones, do you have any idea that you were on the radio and that your words snuck through? Turns out we only got one call to complain, and it was an older gentleman, and for all we know, he heard what he heard. But it went by so quickly, and no one expected it, including me. That was a terrible experience. The only other experience that was really, really bad, and this goes back to my high school days. I've never revealed this. Remember the Lawrence Welk show? You got to be really up there like me. In high school, our guidance person took us to the South Shore Music Circus in Cohasset to interview the stars of the Lawrence Welk show. Now, I only knew Lawrence Welk because my grandmother watched Lawrence Welk every Saturday night. So Bobby and Sissy were this dance team, right? And they were these stars. This is 1972. And they were, you know, flowing hair and all that. Go into the dressing room. We're just kids, two of us. And Bobby, I won't want to use language in front of the children, was not a very nice man, the way he treated his wife and the way he treated us. And I got the impression that this guy was really crude and rude and horrible. And forget about how he treated us, it was the way he was treating her. So I came away with an anti-Bobby and pro-sissy attitude, and I'll never forget that. And you know, that stuck with me because it's like treating anyone with respect is what should be done, particularly people you're married to. I don't know how long they stay married. So that was the worst interview experience, because then what do you do when you're a kid? You know, what do you do? But the first one was the Dartmouth professor. That was just too good. Yes, sir, you got the mic.
A friend of Dixie's here, but my mother-in-law lived to be over 105, and she spent a lot of her time in bed watching TV, listening to the radio late at night when she couldn't sleep. And when she turned 100, we sent out form letters to people that were important in her life. We got a response back from President Bush. We got a response back from Judge Judy. We got a response back from Alex Trebek.
Oh, wow.
We got a response back from you. And not only that, it was a handwritten, personal letter, autographed picture, something that she kept with her for the last 5 years of her life. I just wanted
Wow.
to thank you.
That's very touching. Thank you. That means a lot to hear that, and I take that with every bit of gratitude, because those are the moments that make a difference. It's the little things, you know. I mean, I had a great career, and I'm still having a fine time, but hearing the stories like that really touched me. Thank you.
Mr. Rich, I love your voice. If I happen to flip on the radio and you could be saying anything, you could be singing the Pledge of Allegiance, I don't care. I love listening to your voice. And I'm wondering, were you born with this voice or have you had professional training?
When I was 3, mama, dada, gaga, goo goo, no. My voice changed when I was 12. Conveniently enough, right before puberty, and then, but I have absolutely had a lot of training, and I owe a lot of my success to people I trained with in college. And I can tell you, honestly, that I sounded a lot different before I learned how to speak non-Boston. Hi, how are you? How you doing? You know, I was from here, like everybody else. How are you? You know, and the thing that I always tell my students, and Carol, you may remember this, standard American. Well, what does that mean? It means you don't want to sound like you're from any particular region. This is the toughest place on the planet Earth, if you have an accent, to shake it, because it's ingrained. It's in the, it's up here, it's through the, and I appreciate your kind words about my voice, I really do. And I've worked at it, and I still work at it. I work at it every day. It's about breathing, it's about texture and all that kind of stuff, but it's really about hearing yourself. If you can hear yourself, you can change your voice for the better or whatever. So, you know, try this. Everyone just do it at your seat. Say today was a beautiful day without smiling. Just say that. Now put a smile on your face. Today was a beautiful day without smiling. I mean, it's performance, but we're all performers to a certain extent. Great question. Don't worry, the food's not getting cold.
I think we're probably the only Midwesterners in the room.
Oh.
And then ironically, I'm more of a music radio person and my husband's the talk radio person, but I signed us up because I thought he'd be interested. And the other thing I just want to say is being a music radio person, so it's not quite parallel, but I really tell people a lot, or tell myself a lot, how much I like radio versus the app streaming me a bunch of music.
Spotify, whatever.
Yeah, which is great if I really want to hear a certain album, which I never get around to. But the idea of a human being at the other end and thinking that they have selected some things for me and that they will be telling me about them and that they know a little bit more than me, just enough more, a lot more, and everything like that. And I think about that a lot, how I hope the medium never goes away, because it's so heartwarming. And you think about it too during the pandemic and the lockdown. You're like, oh, there's a human being out there who's still talking to me. I just wanted to say.
Thank you. I spent a lot of years spinning records or playing tapes, whatever, and it's a totally different animal than talk radio, because you're exactly right. You're giving a gift of your knowledge, whatever. But sadly, because of the technology, it's going away. There are very few jocks, male or female, anymore, and it's a part of our culture that may not return the way it did. However, that being said, there are exceptions to every rule. Do you know the name Ron Della Chiesa? Yes. Dear friend of mine. He recently retired, and Ronnie is
He boxes too.
He does?
He took my class a couple times.
Yeah. And what I love about guys like Ron is that they're natural and real. And I do an impression of Ron, so I'll share it with you. He always sounds like he's about to have a little indigestion. This is Ron Della Chiesa, WGBH, Music America. And he never lost his accent. And you know what? Who cares? It doesn't matter. You don't have to. And Norm Nathan was the other one that you may not know. You may not know. And Norm was Uncle Norm, and he had characters he did and bits that he did. But he was just there to tickle you at night, and make you laugh and make you smile. Didn't have a evil bone in his body, and he just warmth exuded and humor exuded. So these are the people that make the difference.
I used to love Robert J. Lertzema.
Robert J. Lertzema.
The birds in the morning.
Yes, remember Robert J. Lertzema? Anybody remember him? This is Robert J. Lertzema. I'm shooting the birds. Boom! Crazy. Yes, sir. Oh.
Don't need the mic.
Well, we want to hear you.
Thanks. The one thing, whenever I hear you're on BZ, I said, oh, a friend is on the radio. That's the way your voice and the way your manner sounds to me. But I was wondering, back in the 50s into the 60s, 70s, if we'd go on a road trip, we'd always tune into NBC Monitor. And I was wondering if you have any comments on that. That was a service only on the weekends with personalities like Henry Morgan and Bob and Ray.
No offense, it might be a little before my time to hear it live. I know all the people you're talking about, Bob and Ray, oh my God. The greatest radio creators, if you will, of situations, the slow talkers of America. But, so I wasn't familiar with it. But these are the personalities that were larger than life, and they bopped on through those speakers, and you felt like they were your friends, right? Yeah.
Yeah. One other question, Connoisseur's Corner.
Yes.
Is that theme Gary Burton?
Oh, you know what? That little theme that hits at the beginning of everyone, I have no idea. I didn't add that theme. They just threw it up there, and it's been there for 20 years. I can look into that, though. I should find out who that is. Very good.
Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Jordan here on Connoisseur's Corner with my friend Matt Robinson.
Yes.
There's a new restaurant opening in your living room. Why don't you tell us something?
Well, I just want to say before I end my little spiel, this gentleman is a prince. He's a great, great friend and a wonderful colleague, and he's got a beautiful family, and he never comes empty-handed anywhere. So when he shows up at the studio, he's always got a box that big, and it's snacks and popcorn and drinks and salsa and all kinds of stuff. So I haven't had to shop for the last 20 years.
Yeah, that's why you call me more often than you used to.
That's why you get invited back.
Yeah. Well, it's always been a pleasure. I couldn't think of a better guest to have to capstone our first season. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope to see you all again in September. Thanks to the library and the Needham channel. Please eat some of this because my family and I can't eat it all, and it's delicious, and enjoy. Thank you.